Peace and blessings, YouTube. Today I want to talk about Grass, Sang Soo's 22nd feature film. Talk about prolific. He makes about 3 films a year. It's really something. So I've seen Grass about 4 times. Comes in about 68 minutes. It's really a treat. And the DVD is put out by Cinema Guild. It's really awesome cover art. Now I've seen Grass about 4 times, and it's great every time. And you need to see it about 3 or 4 times to really get everything out of it, because each time you see it, you come away with a different interpretation. In it is the usual collaborator of Sang Soo, Kim Min-hee. She plays a character who insists is not a writer, but she sits in a cafe and she types away on her laptop, listening to different conversations, eavesdropping essentially. And the 2 conversations that she hears in the cafe are about suicide. The first one is a couple, and the young woman blames the young man about a woman's suicide. And we suggest so much from this, and so does Min-hee's character. We assume it's a suicide. We assume that the woman that they're talking about committed suicide. We assume that because the woman is blaming the man for it. We assume so much about their backstory and their relationship. We become so curious about their backstory. What could have happened to her? Why did she commit suicide? And it seems like a love triangle, or was a love triangle. The second conversation that Min-hee overhears is about a struggling actor who has given up acting, and he admits to his friend that he's tried committing suicide, and now he's just trying to get his life together, and he's trying to get better. And Min-hee's character creates their story for them in her voiceover. She says things like, "Can he ever fall in love with an innocent heart?" Now, Min-hee's character is more than just a woman who sits at a cafe overhearing and eavesdropping other people's conversations. Later on, one of the highlights of the film for me is when she goes with her brother to meet her brother's girlfriend. And we get to see her being really assertive and really brutally honest in terms of relationships and marriage. She becomes like a detective in that scene where she asks her brother's girlfriend about marriage and have they thought about it. And then we get to see the different opinions on marriage between the brother and Min-hee's character. Her brother believes in love and getting married because of love, and Min-hee's opinion is a little bit more hardened, and maybe from her experiences, because she thinks that 2 people should really know each other before they get married, and you should get married with someone who really suits you. And also she scoffs at his opinion about love and getting married. She says loving each other, what bullshit, you know. And she also embarrasses him in the scene because she's a detective in the scene, and she's interrogating his girlfriend about, what is it that you like about my brother? What is it why would you date someone like him? And it's really embarrassing, but again, we see a different side of her character that we didn't see before in the cafe scene as she was eavesdropping, and we didn't expect her to behave this way. And then it's really funny because occasionally she would say things like, "I'm just asking," and maybe it's just a writer in her. That same scene, we don't pan, but it's a direct cut to a different set of characters. 2 characters who, again, the topic of suicide comes up. And not only is it mysterious in what is said, but it's also mysterious in the way it's shot. We don't know that Min-hee's been eavesdropping on them until the very end, when we cut back to her and her brother reacting to the conversation. And the conversations between an older man and a younger woman. The old man basically blames the young woman for a professor's suicide. This professor committed suicide, threw himself off a roof, and the older man is blaming the younger woman for the professor's suicide. He also investigates and asks her, were you drinking as much that day as you are today? I guess we could surmise that the day that the professor committed suicide, the woman was drinking with him. And basically, the man in the scene accuses her of killing him. What really makes the scene mysterious is that at some point in the scene, Sang Soo pans left to a silhouette of the man talking, a silhouette of him on the wall talking. And he says things like, to the woman, he says, "Why'd you drive him crazy?" And she responds with love. And again, he blames her. Did you really love him? And you toyed with him. You never once left him in peace. He really did die because of you. You killed him. And how can it be love to kill someone? The conversation ends, and again, we never see his face. The way that Sang Soo framed it, in the background we see a medium shot of the young woman, but in the foreground we're behind the head of the man, so we only see his neck and shoulder, and we don't really see him until the very end when he looks to the right and we get a slight profile of the right side of his face. It's really something to see, and it's really masterful and confident filmmaking, and really specific kind of filmmaking where there's a specific perspective there. And again, along with the interrogation by Min Hee towards her brother and her brother's girlfriend, and this conversation is also a highlight for me because it's a visual manifestation of the scene beforehand between Min Hee, her brother, and her brother's girlfriend, talking about love and marriage. In this conversation, we see that, yeah, love can grow, but love can also kill, and it can drive, I guess, someone to suicide. Again, in the end of the conversation, we see that Min Hee and her brother have been listening, so it's kind of like a necessary lesson for him to hear this. But this conversation really made me think, because you can't depend solely on just love in a relationship. There's also a character in it that was supposed to have a date, but she gets stood up and she waits outside the cafe. Then she comes back inside the cafe and she looks at her phone, no message, and then she starts to repetitively climb up and down the stairs, run up and down the stairs. She does it about at least 10 times, 10 or 11 times. I lost count, but I think what the film is trying to say there, and what her character and her behavior is trying to say, is really, this might be a way of her fighting rejection, and a way of fighting loneliness, and fighting pain. And maybe this is what makes her feel alive, and gives her strength. And maybe this is also a way that she can forget or keep suicide off her mind. I've also thought about, why is the film called Grass? And plants represent life, and the film talks a lot about suicide. And outside the cafe, the main cafe, there are potted plants, and at the beginning of the film, the plants are really short, and they barely have any life to them. They barely have any growth to them. And towards the end, we see, even though the film takes place during one day, during the end we see that the plants are much taller. They've grown over the course of just one day. Again, that sort of symbol, that physical symbol, is really an example of the magic in Sang Soo's films. Here's some interesting things that the characters say. Of course, they're drinking soju. So one character says, "On an autumn night, there's nothing like soju." There's another character says, "Soju on an autumn night, it looks great." There's also Min Hee's character's voiceover towards the end, which I really love. She says, "Their emotions combine and give each other strength." Again, she's talking about the gathering of souls and soju, and how that makes them feel better, especially after talking about suicide. She also says, "Why does that smuggled soju look so good? I like to steal a sip too. When will my chance come?" Now she says this as she watches the actor-writer character and the lonely character, the one that got set up on a date, as they walk together into a darkened alley. She says this: "In the end, people are emotions. Emotions are gullible and forceful, precious, cheap, and alluring, and I long for them now." And it made me think, she's lonely too. And maybe her going to this cafe and writing, and going to the cafe and overhearing different people, the strangers' conversations, it makes her feel not so lonely. Just as she recognizes other people are lonely, I think she's just as lonely too. And I think the film shows that how do people combat loneliness? How do they fight it? They drink, they have affairs, they get intimate, they talk, they share emotions. They go to a cafe and listen classical music, which is what the cafe plays as the conversations are going on. They eavesdrop on each other's conversations, you know, like Minhee's character. Now, Minhee's character at the end remarks after hearing the first couple talk about suicide and talk about spending the night together. Sure, the living must go on. The present is so precious. I envy you two, you insignificant things. You'll die someday. Even with a dead friend beside you, you don't think of your own death. That's why you're so well composed, pretty and composed. It's now to end it off, I highly recommend the film. It's one of my favorite Sang Soo films. Um, the trailers or the clips of his films don't do it justice, or they do, because once you see them, you're like, okay, I have to see the whole thing now because I'm so curious about it. And also, I wanted to say that amazing how 4 or 5 years ago, it was really hard for me to find any Sang Soo films on DVD. It was really tough, but now, since he's so prolific and with the growing international acclaim he's been receiving, his films are much more readily available in the States. So that's something that I'm really grateful for. This film really, in a subtle and powerful way, makes talking about suicide helpful, and he shows how the aftermath of it and the people affected by it, how they deal with it, and also makes the audience, the viewers, curious about, will these people not get over it, but will they move on and will they grow stronger from it? And I think they will, because you know, according to Minhee's character, they gather together to drink and talk about it and to make themselves feel better. And the film is just really magical.